right. Well, welcome to another episode of Drastic Talks. I'm with an incredible big brain today, scientist from TNO, Heather Wray. Welcome to Drastic Talks. Thank you so much for being here. You're in Amsterdam.
I am, yes. I am Canadian, born and raised, and I've lived in Amsterdam for 3 years. But before that, I lived and studied all over Canada. And now I find myself, yes, in Europe, living the European life. Yeah.
Well, we have an additional connection besides doing this, is that we both went to the University of Toronto.
Yes. Yeah. I did my PhD there. Yes. From 2008 until 2014. And then I lived in Toronto again after that. So I've lived in Toronto total 7 or 8 years of my life.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're up to, just in case, people are interested in TNO specifically. You're a scientist. TNO is like one of the big researcher. What are you researching? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, currently I work as a research scientist, which is a very broad title, but basically I do science, I do research all day. And TNO is a Dutch sort of national research agency, and we work on a lot of big multi-partner projects on a lot of different areas. But I'm working on the energy transition. So meaning we're transitioning from fossil fuels to a more bio-based circular economy. So very broad stuff, but I do a lot of the really kind of technical hands-on. I'm in the lab, I'm working with equipment, we're developing technologies, stuff like that. Yeah.
I love the notion of circular economy. I think I know what it means. Can you just, and by the way, just as a digression for a second, are you wearing a bracelet?
No.
I'm hearing like a...
Oh, that's weird.
Is it your cord?
Maybe. I'll
That's
try and be still.
No, because like a... And I don't want people... I can't listen to this because of that noise. You know what I mean? Oh, it's too annoying. Okay, so I love the term and the notion of the circular economy.
Yeah.
I know what it means in terms of, sustainability and sort of a closed loop. Can you tell us a little bit more about that to make sure everybody kind of understands the power of this idea?
Yeah, so what it means to me is, so our current kind of consumption system is very linear. So if you take the example of a building, right? You extract resources, you use them to create a building, you use the building, then you demolish the building, and that's it. And all the materials are just go into landfill or they're wasted. And if you take a more circular approach basically you're kind of closing that loop. So you're reusing materials, for example, so they don't go to waste. You're designing with that in mind, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
I think probably doing a little bit more of that in sort of the automotive and electric car kind of thing, where at least it's not perfect, of course, but they're starting to think about the total sort of cradle to grave, if you will, and thinking about, because we're very bad. I mean, not only in life, but certainly in construction and commercial real estate, where, we don't really think about what to do with the stuff that we no longer need.
Yeah, and I think there is a bigger movement towards now making buildings that are more sustainable, that are healthier, that are more integrated with the community and the environment, and that have other benefits and services besides just being, with some like four walls, and I think that is being recognized. But yeah, I do think there is, of course, still that gap needs to be closed as well. Yeah.
Ask you, what's your opinion on this? Do you get this asked a lot? Well, it's COVID now, and we have to. Things are changing, especially when we think about commercial real estate and construction and all this kind of stuff. Historically, real estate's pretty slow to adopt change. I mean, these are like monolithic, and in some cases, especially where you are, historical, right? These buildings are old.
Yeah.
How do we start to bridge the gap between what exists and what it possibly could be as far as sustainability and health and mixed use and all this kind of, how do you even begin that journey?
I think we've already started that. I mean, you're right. Real estate and investors and owners are a bit slow to adopt some of these things. Some are very progressive. A lot of it comes down to money, of course, and they all want to know, what's the business case? What's the value for me? Why should I do this? But you can also approach it in that way as well. So, you know, we're faced with climate change right now. We're faced with these extreme, not extreme, but like very lofty goals of the Paris Agreement, where we're talking about being carbon neutral by 2050. How are we going to achieve that? And also in the face of climate change, our buildings, which last for, you know, 50, 100, or, you know, as you said, in the case of Amsterdam, hundreds of years, they are at risk because of pending climate change. So not only risk of physical changes with extreme weather or drought or storms, things like that, which could physically harm the building, or there's physical risks, but also transitional risks associated with, you know, new rules that we need to meet, new regulations that we need to meet our Paris goals.
Do you think like the innovation agenda, quote unquote, is speeded up, slowed it down because of COVID? Like, do you think, has it accelerated the desire to start to pivot this stuff? Or have people gone, I just need to figure out how to like get the HVAC working?
Well, it's a really good question. I think we still have yet to see what happens because we're still in the midst of it, of course, and we haven't emerged yet. But I do like that there is more conversation about using this as a moment to reset and come back better. You know, I work with a friend, Elizabeth Nelson, who's also working on, who's also participating in the summit, and she and some of her colleagues have developed a smart building certification, and they're doing a lot of stuff around COVID as well, and making sure that your building is prepared for, you know, like how to be safer basically for COVID, and what types of prop tech and technologies you can use to, and smart technologies you can use to do that. So I am encouraged by those types of things that we're seeing. And of course, as a researcher, there's tons of research being done as well about coming back and focusing more on sustainability. Now, whether that's all talk or not, I mean, I don't know. We have to see, because of course, some industries where we really need to focus on sustainability, like aviation, for example, I mean, they're really just struggling to survive right now. So are they really going to be able to come back? And, you know,
that's kind of I don't know if it's a catch-22, but it's certainly the paradox between, I just have to get things back somewhat on track from an industry perspective. But one of the things that we're doing at PwC is we're really using this time, and I think a lot of organizations are, so it's not just about us, to really, as you say, rethink the work experience, the occupancy experience, why we go to an office in the first place, what that office needs to do, how it needs to cater to the tasks at hand, this kind of stuff. And it hasn't really been reset for a really long time, other than co-working spaces. If you think about, you know, the WeWork of the world, that was kind of like one of the few attempts, I think, at trying to rethink this. You were talking about your colleague Elizabeth, and I'm just curious, when you think about prop tech and some of the things that you're seeing, are you seeing any trends at all? Are there any techs out there that's going, wow, that's really, really cool? Anything?
in general, or?
Yeah, this is like you're trying to say, oh man, I saw this thing, it was really cool, or
I don't think if something comes to mind. I'll keep thinking about it. There's lots of really cool stuff. I think some of the biggest innovations and interesting things that are happening around health and how that pairs with sustainability. So, you know, really beautiful buildings that are designed with sustainability in mind, but also keeping, making it a pleasant space, health. I guess one of the coolest innovations that I have a personal interest in as well is related to that. It's green spaces, but more for not just, you know, plants, but I'm really interested in urban agriculture, and specifically urban agriculture in buildings. So rooftop gardens, vertical gardens, and I think we are seeing more innovation towards that, and some big, I mean, that's been going on for a long time, but I am excited about where that continues to go as well.
Awards in that too, if I recall.
Yeah, I started a project in Toronto at U of T, You should go visit it. So I can
I watched,
it's on one of the engineering buildings, and it's yeah, it's a lightweight rooftop vegetable garden, and it's been there for about 10 years now. Yeah.
I was talking with someone else on one of these interviews, really about urban farming and rethinking at scale, large buildings to be, they service us differently. We work with them differently. And I'm curious because for me, it seems like such a good idea. We need food. We don't have necessarily space. I can't believe this hasn't caught on more quickly in a way. Like, it just seems like such a great idea. What's wrong with us?
I mean, it's money. That's what it comes down to. That's all it is, really, I think. There's not a strong enough business case, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the equation, people and profit and purpose and
Yeah.
all. It's interesting because the notion of, ROI, return on investment, against this stuff, I think we need to redefine what those metrics or KPIs are. So right now, tell me a little bit about the ROI and about when we think about, these mixed spaces and urban farming and the stuff that you're really passionate about. How can people think about it differently to think about the cost benefit?
Yeah, so if I take the example of the rooftop garden that I set up for as an example of sort of a sustainability project in the building, I was just interested in it more from a research engineering perspective. Hey, can we grow food on a rooftop without altering the structural capacity? It was very much an engineering challenge for me. But there were so many other benefits that came with it. So of course there's food that we grow, and we did some calculations. So what's the value of that produce if you were to go buy it in a store? And then we can calculate, okay, we invested this much money in the garden, and based on this yield that we're getting for these vegetables, we estimate our return would be, and I think it was like 7 years or something like that, which is actually pretty good. We were quite happy with that. But what we're not factoring in there are other benefits and things that even I didn't really expect to see. So for example, there were a lot of social benefits. So we had a lot of volunteers helping with the garden. We also hired some students through work-study programs. But basically, people would say, oh, how much they loved participating and how relaxing it was for them and how they made friends and how it improved their mental health. Those are those types of benefits that are really difficult to quantify. They're much more qualitative. And so it's really difficult to put a dollar value on that. And then there's other ecosystem benefits as well, like, we reduce storm runoff, which eases the impact on Toronto's sewer system or storm system in the long term. We have a little green space. If we had more green spaces, we would have an effect on the urban heat island effect. Yes. Or we're affecting potentially, the heating and cooling of the building itself, because we're providing sort of an extra layer of insulation almost through the plants in the soil. And those again are very, very difficult to quantify or really to scale up. When it's on such a small scale, it's really not a huge impact. So people don't tend to pay attention. And then the other social things too, like just education. So we would host workshops, we would have researchers come and do research. Other students from other universities would use it as a research place, So there's all these other sort of benefits that are a little bit more maybe qualitative. And that's very difficult to explain. And I think people don't necessarily get it if you were just to tell them,
Yeah, it's like you need to see the old model, if you will, is to see the dollars and cents on the P&L. But I wonder now, based on the fact that we're kind of in this COVID moment right now, and there's lots and lots of talk about occupancy and how most organizations, they're going, hey, you know what, we really only need like 30% of our current footprint. So that's going to be a problem for for a lot of building owners and companies as they think about how do I attract tenants.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm wondering, what's your perspective on using sustainability and healthfulness and rethinking the building environment as a competitive advantage to bring in tenants? Like, do you think that's a thing, or am I making that up?
No, I think it absolutely is a thing to bring in tenants, but also for those tenants to bring in talent. So, there's a war on talent, and there are studies that show that if your company has sustainability ambitions or goals, then you're more likely to retain employees, they're more likely to be satisfied, especially younger people who really care about this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
um, and a lot of organizations now also have, there's a lot of social enterprises that I think kind of goes along with what their business is doing. And a lot, everyone's talking about sustainability, and you kind of have to put your money where your mouth is in a way too, like you should really live what you're preaching. So
Well, how do you?
yeah, I think there is a lot of advantage to being in a more sustainable building. And like personally, given the choice between working for a company that's in a beautiful sustainable building that has a green space, and it's all healthy, and more traditional sort of cubicle, yeah, I would want to work in the building that's healthy and more sustainable. And I think most people would say that. Yeah.
And yet, um, buildings, by and large, I mean, I think I read something about you and thinking about sort of human-centered design and design thinking, um, and how it's really, if I'm making this up or confusing with someone else, I really apologize. But it was really about how um, the majority of spaces where we go are not designed with the end user in mind, the people in mind. They're designed, yeah, a little bit of human centricity, but really it's about, cost per square foot. We're really thinking about optimizing tech and all these kinds of things, and not really thinking about what do people want from their workplace experience. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, I agree. I think that's true. I think we are seeing um, a bit of a shift more towards companies that maybe when they renovate a building or commission a new building, they are thinking more about, and they're consulting with their employees. What do they want? What kind of work environment do they want? But I think that's definitely the exception still, and not the rule.
It's
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird thing in a way, because so many other industries, and maybe it's because it's not as cost prohibitive, or there's not such a big sunk cost in the building. But you think about how our expectations around services and goods and all these things have been really driven by, sort of that Amazon effect that people talk a lot about. It's like, well, Amazon does it this way, so now I expect everybody to do it this way, and I'm not going to expect any less of an experience. Yet in our built environment, we we might say, oh, I really wish that it was touchless, or I wish that they grew tomatoes on the roof and I can have a caprese salad for lunch.
Yeah.
Great, but nothing happens.
Yeah.
Do you think that tenants, do you think us as people need to be thinking about it more, asking for it more? What can we do as sort of the
Yeah.
consumers?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think a lot of companies get feedback from their employees, so that's one way I think to do it. Um, yeah, as a tenant, I mean, you can ask for it, or you can just do it, which is basically what my friends and I did at the university. We were like, we want to build a garden, and we just did it because we wanted that space. So, a lot of these types of projects too are also can be initiated internally. So the more people that know about it, yeah, maybe it will make its way up. But we really need leaders in these companies too, to really lead by example and to really care about this stuff. And some do, and I don't know the best way. I mean, I think some of the best ways is just to show people and have them experience it themselves. I don't know. Yeah, maybe you have some thoughts on that as well.
It's a tough one, because you're right. It's like, who's going to lead the way? And I was going to ask you if you've seen any um, standout companies, I guess, around the globe who are, really pushing this sort of sustainability, innovation, commercial real estate agenda. in a way that's making people take notice, because I think it's one of those things where I kind of hope it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that, one or two major companies, like kind of a little bit like Lead, right?
Yeah.
Where, there were some companies out there who decided to take the leap, and they're leading by example. And then you realize it can be done. Like, for
Yeah.
example, Honda Canada, and I only know this because I work with them in my advertising days. Their new headquarters is all LEED certified. They have green roofs. They have all the stuff. They recycle engine parts. They do all these things, not because necessarily it impacts the bottom line, but because it's the responsible and the right thing to do. So I think you're right. I think it's got to start with leadership, and I think it has to start with a grand vision to make sure that what you're doing sort of culturally is reflected in everything that you do. It's like, for example, I know I'm monopolizing the conversation. Sorry, but it doesn't matter. I was just, it's okay. Okay. So
Well, there is a company here based in Amsterdam called Edge Technologies, and they build sustainable buildings, and they've been doing it for a while. That's their mission, and they build really sustainable, really healthy, really beautiful buildings. So I would say they're one of the leaders for sure. And yeah, and then there's like you mentioned LEED, so some of the certifications I think are kind of showing us the right way. I mentioned the smart building certification. What I like about that one is that it's based in science, and so a lot of certifications, it's kind of like, hey, we're building a new building, here's the expected performance, it's a LEED Platinum. Okay, great. But then in practice, well, maybe it doesn't quite perform that way. So what I like about the smart building certification is it's really about measuring and then optimizing based on what you're measuring. So you're continuously improving. So I think the life of a building is long, right? So we need to constantly be checking in and improving things. Yeah.
what do you think, how do you think this will impact if people are really going to start to lean into home office and maybe even co-working spaces? But let's talk about home office for a second. We're spending a lot of time here. Is there any thought to that? I mean, it just seems like the majority of us just put like a ironing table and a bed and a living room or a dining room chair. And
yeah, my home office is shameful. But yeah, I think we're going to see more people working from home even after COVID. Because people are working from home, they can still be productive, and I think a lot of people like it. So that's going to shift as well how we use spaces, as you said, with occupancy. Maybe everything is more flex spaces, or maybe we can use more of the spaces for other things, like we were talking about, that aren't just about the building and the building occupants, but maybe extend a little bit beyond beyond the walls as well, and impact the community more, or have different benefits. But we'll see. Yeah.
Need for companies or organizations to change the way they're thinking about sustainability and the home office, and actually do something for its employees, whether it's policies, whether it's a stipend, whatever, to say, look,
Yeah.
important to us. So if you go in this direction, it means X or Y.
Yeah, I think we'll see that. And I think even with things like travel as well, because people are concerned about travel, and I think we're going to see people traveling less for safety reasons, but also, I mean, there's cost savings associated with that as well. And, we've all gotten used to teleworking and having meetings on Teams or whatever. That's also can take the place of flying to, somewhere to meet someone. So I think we will see companies sort of adopting new policies around that as well. And maybe things that they can do to help their employees with that too. Yeah.
It's going to be a very interesting couple of years to see what happens. It's like,
I think so. Yeah.
I'm really hoping that there will be some companies or whatever that really, go hard at this. And then we're going to look back at it and go, like, what took us so long? Like,
Yeah.
so afraid of? Why didn't we try harder? Why were we only worried about the fixed number on the on the return? Because, like, if you think about, I'm just going to go back to ROI for a second, because I think
Yeah.
kind of, I really think this is one of those things that people need to rethink. Employee happiness, or their ability to work more efficiently, or health, or, I mean, those are all massive, differentiators or benefits, I suppose. And, we're working in a lot of these buildings currently, it just isn't good.
Yeah. I think there's a real opportunity for some leadership, especially coming out of this crisis. I think it's a real opportunity for some organizations to really, take a different tactic and like you said, be really bold about it. And then we can kind of look back and say, oh, they initiated this, or why, if they're doing, because a lot of times, people don't maybe want to be the leaders. They would rather, if you're risk averse, you'd rather maybe follow and let somebody else try it out first before you're willing to do it. But I think there's a huge opportunity for people to take the lead.
I certainly hope that it doesn't kind of get lost in the whole COVID, protocols, and we're just going to worry about, those other things first.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I mean, are you seeing, big trends happening in commercial real estate and sustainability and construction and that kind of stuff? And how are you seeing the interplay between, like, how are they finding a balance between tech and, sustainability and ROI? How's that coming together?
What do you mean in terms of new buildings or?
Either way, I mean, are you seeing, like, for example, in the business that I'm in, we're seeing, and maybe this is why I'm talking about it a bit more, the notion of design thinking, human-centered design. That's becoming a massive trend in pretty much everything that we're doing, because it's like, for years, we've seemed to have forgotten about the people who are actually using the stuff that we're making. And now it's like co-creation and that kind of, design thinking principles are taking a front seat in everything, in sort of the world of consulting and that kind of stuff. So in your world, what are you seeing as far as trends go? Are you seeing, like, is there anything that's surprising you?
I think for the more progressive companies that are working on sustainable buildings, there is more of a move towards systems thinking, thinking outside the walls of the building, and how does the building integrate with the local community, or how can it impact that? So maybe it's a hub of energy creation, or maybe it's a community gathering space, or maybe there's a garden that's producing food or composting waste. So I do think the more progressive people in the industry are thinking about that as a final sort of product of their building.
Yeah. See a lot of connectivity. I mean, lots of people are talking about, the Internet of Things and smart buildings and connectivity, although the majority of stuff is just automation. It's not even really that smart. But it's interesting. I'm just trying to think of, like, okay, think about Toronto and its downtown core. Do you remember the path, right? The whole underground tunnels.
Yeah.
Cities have that. That's kind of an interesting way of connecting and creating community and stuff, basically in buildings that have different ownership, but you're not seeing it on the outside.
Yeah.
Or the tech side either. Like, it's kind of interesting. Like, I would love to see a trend that really starts to integrate these things and becomes more predictive.
Yeah, and I think it's very siloed. And even within an individual building, there's a lot of technology and things that are logging and measuring data points. But what do you do with that data, if anything? Or it's not all going to a central place, or nobody's even looking at the data, or making sure that your systems are working properly or efficiently, or, you know what I mean? I think everyone's like, oh, data, let's collect all the data we can. But if you're not actually looking at the data and analyzing it like properly, well, what good is it then? Why are you, why bother?
You're wasting everybody's time.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Hey, why did you end up in Amsterdam? Was it just the job opportunity, or was there something specific about that?
No, I just always wanted to live in Europe. And yeah, my husband is well, he's Canadian, but he's also German, so it was relatively easy for us to move. So that's why. Yeah.
Totally stereotypical. Do you bicycle a lot?
Yeah, of course. Amsterdam, yeah, the Netherlands, yeah. We cycle a lot, yeah. I
I've never
take the train a lot as well, yeah.
I've never been to that part of the world, but I really want to. You
Yeah,
know,
you should come visit.
well, maybe someday. I don't know. um, hey, this is, I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but it's something that I've asked the others. And that's the notion of kind of gender diversity. You're a leading scientist. You're participating in conferences and things around the world. Um, Commercial real estate is kind of feels historically like kind of more of a male dominated kind of industry. And I'm wondering what you're seeing as far as that, because I know it's D&I, diversity and inclusion, is really important to a lot of organizations, including PwC. I'm sorry if I have to, I'm not, I just want to make sure I'm not leaving them out. How do you think that, the industry, real estate industry is doing in that space? I mean, does it feel like it's moving forward or not really?
Well, I mean, yeah, so I work mostly in like science and engineering, also very much a male dominated industry, although we're seeing more women in technical roles and in engineering and science and research. So that's good, academia. But it is, a bit slow. But I do see companies and research organizations making a conscious effort to hire more women. So that's good. Real estate, same thing, very male dominated. I don't usually go to real estate conferences, but when I do, I definitely notice it's, 90% male. So yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's work that needs to be done if they do want to, yeah, change that.
Yeah, that's I'm hearing that seems to be kind of in line with what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. Are you like a prop tech fan?
Um, yeah, I mean, I believe, well, I believe in science and I believe in innovation and I believe in um, cool things to help solve our challenges, our sustainability challenges and our social challenges. So I think we need to look at things with a critical eye. And, I keep saying it, but I'm a scientist. I want to see I want to see the proof. I want to see the facts. Um, I want to see that something is being measured to show that it's working. Um,
So how do you feel about sort of automation and sort of quote unquote smart?
I think it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of potential there. As I said before, you really need to make sure that you're measuring things properly and you're managing what you're measuring, if that makes sense. So say I have a building and I have an HVAC system that's smart. I need to, say it's controlled based on occupancy. So, which is great already, right? It's not just, oh, you turn the HVAC system on at this time and turn it off at this time or whatever during the day, which is how traditionally they were operated. So it's more, okay, if there are people in this space, then the HVAC system is on. So that's great. That can lead to a lot of energy savings. But of course, you still need to, look at how your system's performing. Is your equipment operating efficiently? What kind of data are you seeing? Are there ways to modify it even more and have maybe there's different triggers that are better, or maybe, you know what I mean? So you definitely need to properly manage all the data that you're measuring. Otherwise, all of this technology is not really useful.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's not. Yeah, I really, I kind of really hope that I'm around to see an integrated city. Like if you think about what Sidewalk Labs was trying to do down
Yeah.
in Toronto, for better, for worse, politics aside, there was some really interesting thoughts going on there in terms of how do you rethink work, life, play,
Yep.
technology, data.
Yep.
People got afraid by that.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool project as well, and some really interesting things. And yeah, kind of like we were talking about, going beyond the walls of a building, and how is it integrated with your community, and how are people interacting with that space? And it's not just about, the boundary of the building. It's beyond that, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's pretty interesting for sure. Um, hey, here's one more weird question that I've asked others, and it's really about putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. So if you have 10 million bucks to invest in some sort of real estate technology or innovation, where would you put your money? If you I have 10 million to invest, what would you do with it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the thing I'm still most interested in is urban food production and some of those interesting technologies. So I would want to do something related to that, just because I think it's also important to do things that you're passionate about. So maybe not the soundest investment, but I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think, yeah, that's something that I would really like to see more of, is more, more urban agriculture utilizing buildings.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty, like, I'm not going to say they're outlandish, but certainly some very forward-thinking renderings
Yeah.
of buildings, and it's like one half of it is all
Yeah.
so they have cows up there, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know about the cows, but it's a very, very compelling and interesting thing, and I
Yeah.
really that there's more of that.
There was like a whole thing in Toronto too about like when there was the whole discussion about what to do with the Gardiner Expressway. Remember, there was some beautiful rendering of turning it into a park, maybe with cows too. I don't remember, but I remember, like those renderings are pretty impressive. Yeah.
I think the closest they got was the skating rink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of the gardeners, so I guess that's cool.
But
Everything.
what about you? What types of, I mean, you work at PwC, so obviously there's a lot of built environment as well too, and office space. What are some of the trends that you guys see, and what are some of the things around your buildings that you care about, or you personally?
Well, yeah, I mean, our building, I mean, PwC has, I think, about 8,500 people working for it in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty big. We have lots of, building and lots of footprints and stuff like that. And I've been lucky to be part of, I guess, an innovation team that's really kind of trying to rethink what does our future work experience look and feel like. And I mean, it's really mixed use. I think people are really tired of the division or the bifurcation between there's work and there's life, or work and home. And that's just fundamentally not how it is anyway for anybody, unless I guess you work in a factory, maybe where you can do your work at home. But I think the blending of the worlds is going to be a major trend. And I think I'm hoping that people are, like, actual tenants are going to start to not demand more, but I think they're going to be more in the forefront of helping organizations define the experience. Because right now it's always been a bit of a, you just get what you get, and there's no standardization of it. It's like, oh, that's the new building. That one's great. It's got good tech. Chairs are amazing or whatever. And then, but you don't want to go to the other one on the outskirts because it's really old and it was made in the 60s and it's shit. So, there's no standardization of that stuff either. But I think people are going to become a lot more demanding. I think we're going to see a lot more interconnectivity and a lot more smartness as opposed to automation. And I'm really hoping that, and I love what you were saying about right now, buildings are very siloed, I mean, even if you have twin towers, I don't even imagine they speak to each other very much. So I'm imagining a world where buildings are borrowing energy or borrowing,
Yeah.
It's got to be more interconnected. And
yeah. Well, even on an energy perspective alone, as you were saying, if we really want to be energy neutral, well, to be energy neutral for a single building is often impossible. And it really relies on basically making sure you can generate enough energy on site and being energy efficient enough that what you generate on site is enough to operate the building. Well, that's just simply not the case for a lot of buildings. They don't have enough space for solar panels, for example, or they're not in, yeah. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit more regional, and how, like you said, borrowing energy or other resources, or yeah, there should be a bit more of a sharing. I could foresee that happening as well.
I just saw this thing, I think it was yesterday actually. And I thought it was pretty interesting how people are thinking about combining technologies and needs in an interesting way. It was somewhere in Asia, I believe, and it was about 40 or 50 kilometers of urban bike lane going through the middle of a highway. Okay, so in the middle. I know. Here's the best part, though. It was all covered in solar panel. So not only was it used to generate electricity, it provided shade for the riders and barriers from the traffic. So it was like this beautifully designed urban passageway for bicyclists. It was just really interesting. Like, how can we generate power? How do we provide more biking? It was like, wow, let's think about how to, put these different things together.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, really interesting.
There's a very wide and big canvas for people who have, I think, a desire and, ideas and a passion for this stuff.
Yeah.
Moving forward. So I really hope that, people, get involved. So I'm wondering, for someone who is interested in kind of like the sustainability journey that you've been on, and maybe even thinking about it, in terms of, especially on the future of commercial real estate and all the stuff that we've been talking about, what do you think people should start to get involved? If someone wanted to get into the industry, is it about a specific type of education or networking, or for someone who's like watching this and go, oh my gosh, I think I've just found my purpose?
Well, if you're interested specifically in sustainability, I think there's a more and more specialized education that really wasn't around, when I was doing my undergrad, related to, supply chain management and just very specific sustainability types of programs. So maybe something like that, if you're looking for a very specific educational path. Yeah, networking is always good. Real estate people really like to network. There's some interesting foundations probably, I think, that are doing some interesting stuff in the space, or funding community projects as a way to get involved. I mean, I'm a researcher, so I always think getting into the data, if that's something that you're interested in, or the technology, developing technology, how we measure things, I think that's also an interesting opportunity as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And what's the best piece of advice anybody ever gave you?
That anybody ever gave me?
Yeah.
I think, well, I'm just trying, the first thing that came to mind is actually when I was in school, and I was really nervous about going back to school. And I was told to just approach it like a job, like, as a way of, and I still think about that for certain things, and approach it like a job in the way of, like, it's not that you shouldn't take your job seriously, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out. If it's really not a good fit, there's something else that you can do. Use it as a learning experience, and to meet good people, like get the most out of it that you can. So that was a really good piece of advice that somebody gave me. That's the first thing that came to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not really, I mean, all things being equal, we're not really stuck, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just approach things in sort of a logical way and extract what you need. And if it's, pay attention, be aware. If it's really not working for you, if it's not a good fit. And of course, I don't always practice this. It's good for me to revisit this too, but, don't be afraid to walk away or try a different approach, or try something new. Yeah.
Is there anything in your area of expertise, as it relates to sort of the topics that we've been talking about that you want to talk about, I haven't asked you about that you think is a really important thing for people to know about? Or do you think we've pretty much covered most of the things
I,
that are?
I think we've covered most of it. I would just say on the topic of buildings and sustainability, I think it's important to monitor what you're doing and evaluate it so you can learn, which we already kind of talked about,
Yeah,
continuously improve things. And really it's a trade-off between, environmental, social, economic. Um, you kind of need to find a bit of a balance there.
I think balance
Yeah,
is the word, all right? Um,
yeah,
when you're thinking about, because it's not so binary, I don't think. That's why I was saying earlier on, if we start to rethink what ROI actually means and how to measure it, it could be a very different, a really different way of looking at it. It doesn't have
yeah,
to. It's either this or that, or if you want privacy, then we can't have like. It's not so this or that. And I think
yeah.
one of the people I was talking to, we kind of got into that a little bit, which I thought was really interesting. It's like it doesn't have to be so black and white.
Yeah, exactly. And I think kind of sharing different ideas of what a return could be is good because so many people are just focused on that dollar value, but you could have a return of local biodiversity, or stormwater retention or other environmental benefits or community building or a mental health improvement. There's all sorts of other returns that you can have by some of these initiatives that you do. And those of course also have economic benefits related to them. But you're right, it doesn't have to be so black and white. And I think the more people are aware that there's other sorts of benefits and impacts and returns of activities and what we do with our buildings and how we operate them and how we build them. Yeah.
I don't think enough people are asking questions. That's for me. It's like, what if this? What if that? What if the other thing? So much closed mindedness. So I've really only got one last question, if that's okay. I know we're a little
Sure.
over time, but what is one important truth that you fundamentally believe in that most people around you disagree with? They challenge you on it. They just don't see it. It's like, oh man, come on. Is there anything that
Well,
that people go, I don't get it. That could be anything.
no, I don't, not really, because I work and associate with people who agree with me a lot or who have similar values. But I am a little bit, I guess, worried and a little bit pessimistic about a lot of these anti-science attitudes that we're seeing now, especially in the face of COVID and climate change. And as someone who studied science and worked in science for my whole life, that's very, very concerning. And I think a lot of people think, oh, science is, and I associate with a lot of scientists and we're kind of in this science bubble and we just think everyone understands the benefits of science and trusts scientists and things like that. But that's not the case. So yeah, I think that's something that I struggle with, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it like right now in Amsterdam? It's totally off topic with COVID and I'm just curious. How's it been? Have you guys been locked down? Has there been curfew?
We were locked down, and then we started opening up again, and now the tourists are back. No American tourists, or it's all locals. But you see the numbers going up. The number of cases are going up. So it's not what it was in April, of course, where it was at its peak, but you do see numbers increasing. The number of cases are increasing as people start to go out more and interact more and travel more. And you're seeing that all over Europe, of course. So, yeah.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, just circling back on occupancy. The machinations are at work right now, getting people back into offices and to schools, right? I have kids and
Yeah.
one's almost done high school and the other one's starting off in university this year. And again, this is tangential, so they can cut it out. But so my son, he's supposed to go off to Queens to study science, and he's going to do it online from home because
Yeah.
there's go. And my daughter's going back into typical environment of high school, and I don't know how that's going to work. Like it profit
Yeah.
over purpose or profit over people, whatever
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty freaky.
Yeah. And also just, I don't know, just the not trusting scientists. I don't think it's as much of a problem here, but not listening or thinking you have all the answers yourself because read it on Facebook, or did your own research online. That's something that I just never really thought about it before, because I was in what I called my science bubble, and I was, studying and, only, working in science. And then you discover out in the real world, people aren't that scientifically literate, or they don't care about it, or they really only trust a lot of things that they can see in front of them. So that's a little bit difficult to contend with. And I don't actually know. I don't know. It comes and goes, but some days I don't really have a lot of faith that that it's going to improve.
It's a tough one, but I mean, I'm maybe silly optimist, even though I'm kind of pessimistic, probably. I do fundamentally believe, and we'll wrap here. I do fundamentally believe this is a huge opportunity for innovation, for sustainability, for rethinking the model. And this is the time to do it, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
We often talk about, well, how are you going to, fix the plane when it's in the air? Or how do you change a flat tire when you're moving? Well, you know what, guys? We've kind of stopped mostly. Think about it and lead and try and be agile and iterate.
Yeah. And if you fail, then you just try something else. Yeah.
I mean, what is it? It wasn't even about failing. It was like there's success and there's learning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or, we're doomed to fail better. Samuel Beckett might say. But
yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank you very much. I know it's end of day.
Thank you.
Pam. Super interesting topic. Really appreciate the time that you spent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
And please stay safe. And I guess we'll see you out there on the internet. Look for a LinkedIn request from me.
All right. I'll talk to you soon then.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.